Thakur? Not that I introduced something. So, the festival takes us further from Radhika to Gadadhar, somehow to the glories of the associates of Radha and Krishna. Today we have Bhaktivinoda Thakur's appearance. This appearance day, huh?
Appearance,
yeah. And when there's a wonderful verse defining prema, Ananya Mamata Vishnu, when the whole consciousness is directed, one-pointed towards the Lord. But not just this, Mamata Prema Sangata, also to that which is connected to the Lord. We discussed a few days ago that is everything. But then Krishna is saying in Bhagavad Gita, in that way that you act towards me, I will respond to that mood. So now Krishna is saying the same thing. I have a love for that Ananya Bhakta, for that one-pointed devotee, but not just for him. Mamata Prema Sangata, also that which is in connection to him. And this is how Guru Tattva is working. So we feel very fortunate somehow to be connected to some Vaishnavas who have one-pointed love towards him. Because he loves Radha and Krishna one-pointed and everything in connection to him, to them. But they act in a similar way. They have one-pointed love towards that Bhakta and everything connected to him. And these are called disciples, or the souls who love to invite that soul in their heart. So, and it's very interesting. We discussed how Putana was yesterday. We discussed about Putana, and it's because in her previous life she had a moment and a prayer of pure bhakti. That's why Krishna took her even in the spiritual world. But not just her, also this personality which were in connection to her, and this is Aga and Bakasura. They didn't do anything, but because they were the brother of Putana, Krishna thought, oh, I not only love her, I also love them so much. And they got something much higher than just mukti. It's something special. So this is what we are allowed to do, to celebrate and put our consciousness on a very special and very dear Vaishnava, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura, who actually already with 18, when he was 18 years old, when he wrote his first book, it's called Poriade. It's about King Puru. This was an Indian king who defeated Alexander the Great. So, but I think for me it was always meaningful that this wonderful soul who Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura already had a calling to somehow to the language of the West. In his first book he wrote in English. And he actually wrote some book about the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and he sent it in the year 1896. This was the birth year of Srila Prabhupada. And he said, Bhaktivinoda Thakura sent that book to many universities and professors in Canada and I think US also.
Yeah, Canada, one of the McGill University in Canada.
Yeah. So it was quite interesting. Some sadhu in India. And Bhaktivinoda Thakura is maybe especially dear also to the Western devotees because he stepped out of an Orthodox tradition very much. And he wanted to be innovative. And he had many Gaudiya Vaishnavas that were brought up in a very Orthodox Hindu culture. They never had the perspective much further. But our Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura, even before he became a Gaudiya Vaishnava, he really couldn't adjust to the monism of Shankara. So he felt more attracted to Christianity. And he even studied Emerson. He was an American transcendentalist. And Thoreau. They were already in the 19th century. They were studying Bhagavad Gita. So, and he was close to many Western thinkers and approaches. So that's why his mood and his way of presenting bhakti was far, far outside just the Hindu orthodoxy. And I'm personally so grateful to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura. And he had interreligious ideas very strongly. He mentioned, 100 years before the Second Vatican Council, where the Catholic Church approved that actually Protestants might not go to hell. So it's quite... this was a new thought, because in the 19th century, in the Middle Ages, spiritual traditions were completely separate. They were not intermingling much. But for a visionary and for an amazing soul like Bhaktivinoda Thakura, very naturally embracing the spirit of Mahaprabhu, this was like very clear that it has to be like this. So I'm very thankful that today Maharaj will speak something about our dear Bhaktivinoda Thakura.
Jnanatimirandasya gyanam janashalakaya chakshurmilitam jena tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Namashreshtam manumapi satriputram atrasarupam rupam sakyagraham rupurim maturim gostavatim Radha kundam girivaram maho radhikamadhavasam Prapto yasya pratita kripaya Shri Gurum tam natachmi Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha Nikhila shruti mali ratnamala dirthi nirajita padapankajanta Aji mukta kulairupashyamanam paritashtam harinam samshrayami Anarpita charim chirat karunayavatirna kalom Shamarpaitum unnatojvalarasam savakti shriyam Hari Purata Sundara Dyuti Kadamba Sandipita Sada Hridaye Khandaresh Purato Vasachinandana Ajanulambita Bujjo Kanakavadato Sankirtanai Kapitaro Kamalaya Taksho Vishwambaro Dvijavaro Jugadharma Palo Vande Jagat Priyakaro Karunavataro Ladini Shakti Swarupaya Gauranga Suridaya Cha Bhakta Shakti Pradhanaya Gadadhara Namastate He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Go Radha Kanta Namastute Radhe Vrindavanadishe Karunamrita Vahini Kripaya Nijapadabja Dasyan Mayam Pradiyatam Bhaktya Vihinaya Paradhalakshay Kshiptashtakamaditaranga Kripa Mayitvam Saranam Prapanam Vrinde Maste Charanarvindam Vrinde Maste Charanarvindam Shri Sachinandan Gaur Hari Ki Jai, Shri Harinam Prabhu Ki Jai, Shri Shri Gaur Gadadhar Ji Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radha Govinda Ji Ki Jai. Avirbhav Mahotsav Titi Shri Thakur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Gaur Preman. Hari Hari Gaur. So, good morning, pranam to all of you. Thank you so much, Krishna Chandra Prabhu, for your introductory words, which is very nice to hear you, because many of the things that I want to share today, somehow Krishna Chandra just gave a trailer of that. So that's nice. That shows also the alignment of hearts and inspiration in relation to a figure like Bhaktivinoda Thakura. And I especially appreciated his beginning statements about how one will love Krishna and everything in relation to him, but also how that's also true in the reciprocation, and how he loves the devotee and whatever is in relation to him. Like Krishna, like Bhagavan is saying in the Bhagavatam, Ham Bhakta Paradino, he has Shatantra Dvadijva Sadhuvir Grashta Hridayo Bhaktair Bhakta Jana Priyaha. So at the last line he's saying, first Bhagavan is saying, I have no independence, I'm totally under the control of my devotee, full humility, full vulnerability. And that's Bhagavan in Vaikuntha somehow. So what to speak if Krishna Mahaprabhu were to say the same thing, how much more strong will be those words, so to say. And then he will say, not only my devotee is so loved for me, but even he who is the devotee of my devotee. See, he who is somehow connected to my devotee, I'm also like partial biased in that direction. So that's our good fortune, basically. Bhagavan's partiality toward bhakti is our great fortune. That's somehow how we can explain our own situation here. So in a few minutes, let's give a little moment of unfolding. So so I really appreciated that, and how Krishna Chandra Prabhu concluded. So in this way, being Bhaktivinoda Thakura, who he is, being so loved and close to the divine couple, there are two manifestations here, especially Gaur Gadadhar also. as we all talk today, very intimate connection between Gaur Gadadhar and Bhaktivinoda Thakura. So as close and love that he is, if we somehow make our best attempt to gain some proximity to such a soul, we'll be entering to the domain of the merciful glance that the divine couple will pour on Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Will be just one speck of dust nearby in the air, and we will be part of that glance, and our whole lives will become justified. Our existence can become justified, so to say. We have to justify our existence somehow or other.
Not just eating.
Exactly. We exist, and there is some purpose in that, some potential, and we have to see that properly justified. That's our daily attempts in sadhana. So we are very, very fortunate to belong to what Bhaktivedanta will call the Bhaktivinoda Paribar, which is a very sweet way of addressing our species, so to say. Now, Paribar means family. So he will say, we belong to the family of Bhaktivinoda. No, we are under the banner, under his shelter, under his conception, under his mood. And somehow, of course, as his representatives, we are expected to represent that, to embody that in one way or another. So the inspiration for today came for me to share a few words and a few reasons why I'm personally quite inclined toward Bhaktivinoda Thakur, a fan of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, so to say. It's my personal perspective, but each one can take their own ways. All of us should become fans of Bhaktivinoda Thakur for our own reasons. You don't have to copy paste mine, but I like to share a few of them today from my personal perspective and experience. Okay, yeah, we call wave also in Spanish. We can do it, no problem. That would be a new way of saying kijai. A contemporary kijai. And somehow enter into the wave of Bhaktivinoda Dhara. Sometimes this is the expression. Dhara means current. No? So Bhaktivinoda Dhara is a current that is flowing in a certain direction, in a particular way, and also has waves inside. No? So we are praying to swim eternally into that current as well. So where to start? I would say something that personally really inspired me a lot from Bhaktivinoda Thakur was to know about his life story, his unfolding, so to say, if you want to call it like that. No, there's a very interesting book, which is not a book, it's more like a letter that he wrote to Lalit Prasad, one of his sons, which is called Swalikita Jivani. You may have heard about that, or probably you have not heard about that, because that's a letter that is basically forbidden in a few places. No, I know. That's why I'm talking about it here. I know that nobody will feel like Krishna Chandra is forbidding us about it. He never told about. No. So this is a letter that Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote to one of his sons, narrating basically his life. It's like an autobiographical letter, which is a pretty long letter. It's not just a few pages. It's almost like a book. Mm-hmm. And he narrates his whole journey, so to say, unfolding, as Krishna Chandra was mentioning, having affinity toward Christianity as part of his journey before being officially converted to Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and even sharing some of his previous life habits, so to say, like he is eating meat and things like that, which for some, I've seen some practitioners that can be a shocking situation or difficult to accommodate. No? And in that direction, I mentioned that in some groups from the Bhaktivinoda Parivar, this book is not allowed or is not recommended, at least, because somehow it may put Bhaktivinoda Thakur in a relative light for some. That's it. For me, it adds charm and inspiration. It's not putting Bhaktivinoda Thakura as something less, but it brings him closer to me. I can connect with his journey, not because I'm comparing myself to Bhaktivinoda Thakura, but somehow we need this type of references, journey references that we can relate to. And in this connection comes a point that I know that sometimes it's also, we were talking these days, I think with Krishan Chandra, with somebody, about this idea that sometimes it is said that all the gurus in our tradition are nitya-siddhas, or eternal associates of Bhagavan, eternal liberated, coming from the spiritual world, who have never been under the influence of Maya Shakti, let's say. And of course, here I'm not trying to say who is a nitya-siddha and who is not a nitya-siddha, because to begin with, we cannot know who is a nitya-siddha. We have not a nitya-siddha thermometer. Like this, the process to know if someone is nitya-siddha or not. It shouldn't be my point is, if we are concerned that if someone is a siddha but not a nitya-siddha, oh, that's less. That's our own dualistic mind creating problems. Again, someone asked once Srila Prabhupada, who is higher? Again, this question, who is higher? Nitya-siddha or sadhana-siddha? He said the important word there is siddha, which means perfect. But even interestingly, in our tradition, we find acharyas like ours saying guru can be a nitya-siddha, guru can be sadhana-siddha, or some cases maybe the guru may not even be siddha, maybe an advanced sadhaka. And that's not necessarily speaking less about that. So my point is, although here I'm not, in our tradition generally we will look upon Bhaktivinoda Thakura as a nitya-siddha, the way his life unfolded allows us for another type of approach in which we can connect with experiences he went through. Because also understand this implication. If a guru is a nitya-siddha, means he or she, just in case, has never been in touch with material experience, so to say. So in other words, that person is not able to empathize with the experience you are going in that situation. So I don't know how much you want that or how much we need someone who can relate fully to our experience and can know what we are going through and can guide us and assist us from that. So I'm presenting this idea so we can realize, okay, that the guru is not a nitya-siddha is not a problem. On the contrary. Because again, if we start with this idea, only the guru has to be only nitya-siddha, it's a similar form of rasism, like we talk this day. Everyone has to be a manjari. Every guru has to be a nitya-siddha. It's like of this kind of ego competition. And my guru is a nitya-siddha. So the conclusion is, I'm the best. At the end of the day, it's one's ego trying to push there. So again, for me, it was very, very inspiring to see the life of Bhaktivinoda Thakura. Whether someone wants to consider him nitya-siddha, sadhana-siddha, I'm not here to impose that on anyone. But my point is, his life story is very inspiring. Gives hope. Again, we can relate to so many of those stages. If all the gurus are always nitya-siddha, we don't have stories to relate to, so to say, because they were always there. So that's a beginning thing that comes to my mind in connection to why I'm a fan of Bhaktivinoda Thakura, so to say. Also, something interesting, again, this is maybe more personal to my personal experience, is that, as you may know, there were certain, and of course there may be different versions of this, but there were certain dynamics between Bhaktivinoda Thakura and his Diksha Guru, Vipin Bihari Goswami. Some documents may say even that Bhaktivinoda Thakura was rejected by his Guru. Some say that there was some distance that both agreed with. There's not like a definite maybe opinion on that, although I've heard some documents were there and so on. But my point is, Bhaktivinoda Thakura is Bhaktivinoda Thakura. So what we were talking yesterday, no, even if your guru, like with Bali Maharaj and Sukracharya, even if your guru rejects you or curses you, or this example of Prishadra in the Bhagavatam, if you are sincere, there's nothing that can stop you, basically. Now, Krishna won't interrupt the advance of any sincere soul, basically. If you're a sincere soul, want to reach the goal, Krishna will be there to facilitate that in every form. So again, that's a little bit more connect to my own personal experience and journey, but I'm again not comparing myself with Bhaktivinoda Thakura, but somehow finding references that are giving hope and inspiration. Mm-hmm. Another interesting thing that is inspiring for me, although I'm not in that particular situation, is the fact that Bhaktivinoda Thakura remained as a grihastha most part of his life. And giving that reference, because as we talk these days, at least in my opinion nowadays, not Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and probably not only Gaudiya Vaishnavism, but it's a little bit overtly like emphasizing asceticism and renunciation and placing this idea that if you were suffering, you are necessarily more advanced than someone who doesn't wear saffron, something like that. No? And if you're especially a sannyasi, I mean, minimum you are a pure devotee. Probably nitya-siddha also, but at least pure devotee. So you can imagine how beautiful 1 ton baggage you receive as a sannyasi when people start to over-idealize you in such a way. And the problem is when you buy into that and start to play the game, so to say, okay, they see me as superhero. I have to be a superhero for the society at every moment. So they cannot see my vulnerability, my struggle, my humanity. I have to remain Superman. And even I have to believe myself that I am Superman. So give that sequence a few years and you have a very
alienated,
dysfunctional, alienated scenario. In the name of being a superhero, a savior, developing all this like savior complex or whatever. No? So Bhaktivinoda Thakura as a grihastha is showing like relax, so to say, no? Like you don't need to be a superhero and that's the only way. And if you are not there, you are doing something wrong for sure. If you are in family life, you are in the dark well, sorry. I mean, you can have a dark well in family life, but you can also have a dark well of monastic life. If you use monastic practices as an evasive device to run from your own self, to run from your individuation, from facing your own vulnerability and brokenness, we can speak in terms of the dark well of monastic life. So whether monastic life or married life can be a dark well or can be a very enlightening place, can be an ashram. Ashram means shelter. So Bhaktivinoda Thakura remained most of his life in the grihastha ashram, so to say in the shelter of family life, and he found that all perfection was attainable from that social position, so to say. That's what the Bhagavatam is saying. The famous verse, Jnane prayasa modapasya, eventually says, stanestita. Stanestita means remaining in whatever social position you are, you engage in bhakti and you attain perfection, basically. Sarva dharma parityaja basically means the same. Do away with all varna ashram considerations and embrace bhakti from whatever you are. And Bhaktivinoda Thakura did that to the point that he found Golok in his house. As exaggerated as that may sound, he said that literally. If you study his Sharanagati, he says that. He says, Ye dina grihe bhajana deki grihete golokahai. No? So he's saying basically whenever a devotee engages in bhajan, that person at home, that home becomes Golok.
Spiritual world.
Yeah. Golok means spiritual world. So your house has the potential to be the spiritual world. So there's no need to go somewhere else, so to say. Because sometimes I've seen devotees with this idea, okay, I'm married, but at some point I have to take sannyas. I'm doing this, but at some point I have to leave all this, and still too much thinking about rejecting. at some point I have to reject. And living the present moment thinking this is rejectable, instead of embracing the present situation and opening themselves to bhakti.
Connectable.
Yeah. We are about connection, not rejection. Yoga means connection, not rejection. No. And bhakti yoga means to connect everything or connect with everything through love. I have one quote here I want to share with you in this connection from Bhaktivinoda Thakura from his Harinam Chintamani, just to make the point clear in case some doubt still remains. So he says, I'll read slowly, there is no hard and fast rule for a devotee who has taken complete shelter of the holy names. There is no hard rule to either live at home or live in the forest. Because if the house is more favorable for the cultivation of the holy names, then that is better than the renounced order of life. So basically he's saying, grihastha bon and tako, no? Sadhari bol tako. Yeah. Whether in the forest, no? You are all Banvasis here, forest residents, mountain dwellers. If that's favorable for your bhajan, forest ki jai. and if the home family dynamics are favorable to someone else's bhajan, then grihastha ashram ki jai. No? Again, this is not about being married or being single. It's about bhakti, practicing bhakti from the best possible platform. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, again, his very life example was given, that speaking for itself in that connection. Something that I also like a lot about Bhaktivinoda Thakur is his, what I like to call like trans-institutional commitment. So he was.
She's asking what exactly that means.
I'm going to explain it now. So, technically speaking, Bhaktivinoda Thakur didn't belong to any institution. At that time, there were no Gaudiya institutions. As we conceive now of an institution or of a mission. Nowadays, sometimes that happens. No? It happens to me a few times. I'm in the street and meet the devotee. So, which mission do you belong to? That's basically, if not the first question, that's the second maybe. What's your name? Which is your mission? And what's your? They are asking. Sounds reasonable. Yeah, like the pranam mantra. Because I don't understand German, but I know she's asking you which is our mission, probably. And I would say you use the word mission also for not only an institution, a hard institution, but a life mission. So I think you have to connect, to keep in mind, mission first and foremost means what's my mission, inner mission. Like the famous pranam mantra offered by Narottam Das Thakur to Rupa Goswami, Sri Chaitanya Manovishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale. No, like speaking about the desire in the mind of Mahaprabhu and how Rupa Goswami established it in the world. So in connecting these two things, the inner desire of Mahaprabhu, the inner mission, took the form of an outer lineage, but that's in connection to the mission, internal mission. So if you would have asked Bhaktivinoda Thakur, which mission do you belong to? Maybe he will say Prem. No? And of course, we can say Gaudiya Sampradaya in a more wider way, Gaur Parivar. We will say Bhaktivinoda Parivar. But I think it's important not to over-identify if we belong to a certain institution, which I'm not against institutions here, but those have their pros and cons, as you can imagine. Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta was the one who somehow took Bhaktivinoda's spirit and made that even more concrete in the form of hard institutions, Gaudiya Math, and so on. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur was more about, in his time, Namahata program, no? and decentralized, so to say. spreading of the teaching in a localized way, in a personal way, like trying to keep not too big groups, so to say, but like small, different constellations where people will have close, intimate connection and accompanying, supporting each other, which for me is very important. It's radically personal. And again, the commitment is trans-institutional. It's not that I'm committed to an institution. I'm committed to an ideal. I'm committed to an inner mission. I'm committed to certain hearts. No? Like, as I put in my book, you cannot join an institution. You can only join a heart that sometimes happens to be beating in a certain institution. So you end up in a certain institute, but you are actually joining the heart of that person that beats in a similar, that makes your heart beats in a way that makes your own heart beat. So you are joining that. Maybe there may be some institutional context, but that's like secondary. It's not like primary. The institution first, the person second. Huh? Because that sometimes happens. Sometimes the consideration is what serves better the institution. According to that, we adjust the people. But the people has to be the one to be first and honored and served. And the institution has to be facilitating that personalism. If not, it's impersonalism, in my opinion. Anyhow, it's a long topic. I may go into another direction. So that's something else in connection to Bhaktivinoda Thakura. His trans-institutional commitment, so to say. And in connection to that, also Bhaktivinoda Thakura criticized his own tradition in a healthy way. Like if you pay attention, almost every one of our acharyas did. Bhaktisiddhanta also, not criticizing the essence of the tradition, but the external condition in which sometimes certain parts of our community may find themselves in, and the need for upgrade. For example, when Bhaktivinoda Thakura spoke about the Apasampradayas, or heterodox versions of the lineage, also that will imply so by pointing at that, he was showing there is potential deviation in any lineage. A lineage can start in a certain way and end up being so many other things.
And also in us.
That's what I was going to say. The Apasampradaya begins in our own hearts and minds, basically. We can belong to a very authorized sampradaya, but we can be living that belonging in an Apasampradaic way. We may be misrepresenting a bona fide lineage in an Apasampradaic deviated way. I like very much a quote from Bhaktivinoda Thakura he mentioned in one of the Sajan Toshani, one of his magazines he will publish, and he said, I have it here because I quoted that also in my book. Those who have been entrusted with the responsibility of being leaders in the Gaudiya Sampradaya should try to remove all anarthas from their Sampradaya. So again, it's not that the essence of the Sampradaya has anarthas, because the essence of the Sampradaya is Mahaprabhu's heart. But the current condition of the lineage may end up expressing, starting from us, again, as Krishna Chandra Prabhu says, it's not about pointing outside and throwing stones at outsiders. It belongs at home. So, but the duty of someone representing the Sampradaya is to uproot, so to say, to do the uprooting of the weeds at any particular time. And there's place for that. There is this place for constructive criticism, even of one's own tradition, out of love for the tradition. If you analyze the life of any great prophet, even like Jesus or others, like they will probably criticize the condition of their tradition the most, but they were the ones who loved the tradition the most. So because they loved that so much, they dared to criticize from the place of love. No? I think there is a quote from Abraham Lincoln. He will say something like, "He who has a heart to help." How do you say? You know the quote? Well, basically, he who has a heart to help has a right to criticize, something like that. So we have to remain non-conformist, so to say. I'm not saying just rebellious, but non-conformist. Can I share a paragraph from my book in this connection?
Yes.
Yeah, 1 second. I brought it here. This time I brought it. Yeah. So just one small, short. It says, a healthy non-conformist
Der gesunde Nicht-Konformist
is not righteous,
hat nicht das Recht,
angry,
ist nicht zornig
resentful,
oder
Nachtragend.
or interested in accusing others of being wrong,
oder immer nur interessiert, andere anzuklagen, dass sie falsch sind,
and through that proving himself right.
sich selber als richtig zu beweisen.
Now, that's not a healthy
Das
non-conformist.
ist nicht der gesunde Nicht-Konformist.
Healthy non-conformist
Gesunde Form davon,
seeks a conversation
das ist immer da interessiert, in den Dialog zu treten
where we dare to express
und da sein, etwas auszudrücken,
with love and concern
mit Liebe und mit weil es ihn berührt und anstößt,
how certain things may not be accurate,
wie vielleicht bestimmte Dinge nicht genau richtig laufen
how certain things may not be up to date,
und wie vielleicht ein paar Dinge veraltet sind
or how certain things may not be holding sufficient depth.
oder wie vielleicht bestimmte Dinge in der eigenen Tradition an Tiefe mangeln.
And there is a very necessary place for that.
Und für das braucht es es ist ein ganz dringlich, dass das existiert.
So Bhaktivinoda Thakura had this type of stance. So that's on personal level very inspiring for me. Again, not being a rebel without a cause, but being committed enough as to say those things that can improve our offering as a collective. Also, something else that is very inspiring that Krishna Chandra Prabhu mentioned is Bhaktivinoda Thakura's interaction with modernity, with the Western mind. I mean, he himself was raised as a British, so to say, in India. So he had that particular. He was exposed to that way of thinking, so to say. No? And he had correspondence with Thoreau and Emerson and the American transcendentalists, which all that is for me connected also to the need, as we were talking the other day, to the constant need to find a new language to express these ancient truths. And how to remain relevant as a tradition, we need to always find a proper language to refer to a reality that is always unfolding. Try to understand this point. No? Transcendence, the heart of God, is always unfolding, always evolving. So we need to keep the pace of that. We need to know how to express and explain and refer to that in ways that are transmitting this constant evolution of reality. It's not that this is the only way to speak about it for the next 10,000 years or for the next age. There's only one way. Reality is ever unfolding. So we need an ever unfolding language to try to say something about that. So we need to remain contemporary in our language, not only to the times we are living, but also remain contemporary to God's own unfolding. As I like to say, Krishna is always becoming more Krishna. It's not that Krishna is one single thing that is always the same and never evolves. Remember what we say recently. Krishna is becoming every day more beautiful. He cannot stop that current. And Krishna means the all beautiful. So if Krishna becomes more beautiful, means Krishna becomes more Krishna. So we have to become more ourselves to keep up with Krishna's becoming more Krishna. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We have to develop the Supreme Personality of our own selves to relate to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Bhaktivinoda Thakura very beautifully showed this dynamism in the way he will think of Krishna consciousness, in the way he will present the tradition in a very nuanced way, in a very dynamic way, and in a very deep way. Again, not only like, let's adjust the language to reach more people and fill the temple, like a marketing strategy or something. No, let's understand that there is a constant moving of things and we are to keep changing. No? The love life of everything is changing. It's funny because spiritual life is all about change, but many times people come to spiritual life and they want just to settle there. I receive my set of absolutes and perfect knowledge, so I don't have to change. Now I know the answer to every question. I'm saved. I have the right to condemn those who are not on my elite. And that's it. Nothing to change. Everything is perfect. Complacency, mediocrity, in the name of the highest, more changing dynamic thing, actually. So Bhaktivinoda Thakura was very, very revolutionary in that way. And as Krishna Chandra Prabhu mentioned, he, very interestingly, the first time he sent one of his books to the West was the exact same year, 1896, where Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada was born. So that's no coincidence for us. It's not coincidence, that's God incidence. No. So he sent to McGill University in Canada and some other places this book, Sri Chaitanya, His Life and Precepts. Yeah. It was funny because some years ago, not funny, it was beautiful. Some years ago, I was talking with one friend of mine, and he was in Godrum, in Bhaktivinoda Thakura's place in Godrum, in Navadvip. And at one point, he was there with a group of devotees, and another group comes to the place. And they were people from the West, and they were not Gaudiya Vaishnavas. So he asked them, so who are you? I said, we are all students and scholars. Oh, from where are you coming? Yeah, we are coming from Canada. Canada? Oh, scholars from which university? McGill University, they said. No. And they found Bhaktivinoda Thakur's book there, and they were coming now to see the original place from which all that sprouted, so to say. No, so for him it was like an epiphany, like to see this kind of convergence of worlds, so to say, from Godrum to Canada, and how to bridge the gap. Well, that's a big challenge. How to bridge? That's very consuming task. How to explain, how to say, Gorga Dadar's heart to a Canadian. Where to start, how to continue, where to like sometimes I walk in the street and people ask me, so what do you practice? And I'm like, what are you about? That's basically the question. What are you all about? And I'm like 1 hour in anxiety thinking where to begin. And I'm like, do you have like, I don't know, 2-3 years to hear the answer or something? Yeah, it requires like where to begin, how to continue, and how to continue. So that's a very beautiful task that consumes all your faculties. If you have to think, okay, how do I present the essence of Krishna Bhakti to someone who does have no clue about it? You have to really absorb yourself in that service, in that task. No? So that has the potential to be a very absorbing seva. And as we talked the other day, the background of prachar or spreading the message can be pretty esoteric. No, it's not about just increasing the numbers and getting donations, but it's about recruiting some servants for the realm of the highest necessity, as we already mentioned. So something also that comes to my mind in connection to Bhaktivinoda Thakura. And
Can I just for that before?
again, sorry?
There's one thing.
Yes,
Can I just,
of course.
there's I have an exchange of letters of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura with a German Indologist, Reinhold Rust.
Mhm.
And it's very, very interesting. You know, this was in 1868.
Oh, before the sending of the book.
Yeah. So they conversed by letters. And the German scholar, he already knew Sanskrit, you know, and he somehow find this spiritual revolutionary Bhaktivinoda Thakura. And he wrote him, very interesting, he said, actually, I was very interested and I wanted to go deeper, but the caste system I found, you know, they rejected me, like. But then he came to the books and articles of Bhaktivinoda Thakura and said he wrote in 1868, he wrote Bhaktivinoda Thakura, said, actually, you do a very good service to your own tradition. And I found it very interesting that a German scholar writes at that time to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura, and already in this very appreciative, wow, what you do, you open it.
Mhm. Thank you, very beautiful. Yeah, and I think it's important that we appreciate things like the ones you mentioned, because sometimes we may take for granted all these contributions because maybe we were not born into a society that faced the challenges that Bhaktivinoda Thakura had to face. So we hear about, oh, he did that, and Daibabar Ashram. This sounds interesting, but we are not traveling in time to actually fully experience the challenges he was facing and how complex that was. So it's important that we take the time to empathize fully with the scenario he was seeing, and from that, like, really appreciate, wow, his contribution, and also from that place, ask ourselves, so what's the present challenges now that we as representatives of Bhaktivinoda Thakura have to contribute with? Because it's not just about Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. He will say, okay, enough Ki Jais. Now you do say the Ki Jai through your acts now. Say Ki Jai through representing me in facing whatever challenges need to be faced in your particular place, time, circumstance, and represent that same spirit. Because if not, like sometimes the devotee will say, well, Prabhupada said this, Prabhupada said that, but the question is what he will be saying now. Some things will be the same. Krishna is still the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The soul is eternal and so on. But some other things, I'm sure he will say some very different things. And we are, the point is, but he won't be here saying them. So we are the ones who have to do that. In his service, in representation of the parampara. Something that also Krishna Chandra Prabhu mentioned about Bhaktivinoda Thakura is this point of interfaith, mood he had, interreligious appreciation of other traditions, his own. If you study his Bhagavat lecture, that's like, which of you have never read the Bhagavat discourse that Bhaktivinoda Thakura gave? Okay. You can raise your hand, no problem. It's not a sin not to have done that. I won't be sending anyone to hell or anything. Thank you so much. I'm going there. I'm going to go to point on that. So. Okay. So I'm not forcing any homework on you, but if you are more than invited to read it. Especially today, his appearance day, that may be an interest. We have some version of it for those who. This is a lecture he gave, so it's not like a long book. It's just a lecture he gave, and it's transcribed. The Bhagavat, it's philosophy, it's theology, and it's ethics. I think so. So that's very, very revolutionary, very deep, very substantial, very broad, very deep. Yeah. So he expressed a very deep, how to say, in my book, I like to call it theological cross-pollination, no? Or like cross-pollinating, no? What the bees are doing, like going from one flower and then carrying and taking it to the other flower. So the point is,
Fremdbestäubung heißt das, oder?
Mhm.
Cross-Pollination in der Pflanzenwelt. Da gibt es immer Fremdbestäubungen auch. So, dass keine Tradition nur separat existiert, sondern immer wieder gegenseitig sich auch inspiriert.
like implying you can go to the flower of another tradition, so to say, as a bumblebee, and take some pollen from that tradition that will nourish your own flower, so to say. That you will be inspired as a Gaudiya Vaishnava, but contacting a Sufi or a mystical creed without losing your commitment, your idea, but learning to. So I like to share a few words from Bhaktivinoda Thakura himself that I quoted also here. It's a very beautiful statement in that connection. Krishna Chandra will translate now?
Yes.
Okay.
Which page is it?
It's page, thank you, page 214 and 215. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur said this from Chaitanya Shikshamrita. So he says, if one goes to someone else's place of worship,
Wenn man in einen anderen Ort, zu jemandem geht, der eine andere Ort der Verehrung hat,
one should think as follows.
sollte man folgendermaßen denken.
These people are worshiping my Lord,
Sie verehren doch meinen geliebten Herrn.
but in a different way.
Auf eine andere Weise.
Because of my different training,
Weil ich ein bisschen anders trainiert wurde,
I cannot quite comprehend this system of worship.
kann ich das nicht genau verstehen für ein System der Verehrung da.
However,
Aber
through this experience,
durch diese Erfahrung, die ich hier mache an dem anderen Ort der Verehrung,
I can deepen my appreciation for my own system of worship.
kann ich das Verständnis meiner eigenen spirituellen Tradition sicherlich vertiefen.
The Lord is only one,
Der
not
Herr
two.
ist immer nur einer, nicht zwei.
I offer respect to the form I see here,
Ich verneige mich vor der Gestalt und den religiösen Ausdruck, das ich hier sehe,
and pray to the Lord in this new form
und bete meinen Herrn an in dieser neuen Form hier.
that He increases my love for the Lord in His accustomed form.
Aber vertieft die Liebe zu meinem geliebten Herrn, wie ich ihn schon kenne.
Those who do not follow this procedure,
Diejenigen, die diese Haltung nicht befolgen,
but instead criticize other systems of worship
aber eigentlich dann andere für Systeme der Verehrung kritisieren
and show hatred, violence, and envy,
und die Neid und Gewalt oder sogar Ablehnung gegenüber diesen Systemen ausdrücken,
are worthless and foolish.
sind extrem wertlos und unheimlich dumm.
The more they indulge in useless quarreling,
Und je mehr sie sich ausdrücken in so nutzlosen Debatten,
the more they betray the very goal of their religion.
dann betrügen sie selbst das eigentliche Ziel ihrer eigenen spirituellen Tradition.
Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai. So that's very, for me, very clear, very specific, very powerful, very deep, and very essence seeker. No? Also, this is another of the famous contributions of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, his concept of Saragrahi. Saragrahi Vaishnava. Saragrahi means essence seeker. No? Sara means essence, and Grahi means like to grab, like he who only takes the essence. It's a famous example of the swan taking the milk from the mixture. And he will say, Saragrahi, you can be a Saragrahi Vaishnava, essence seeker Vaishnava, or you can be a Bharabahi Vaishnava. Bharabahi means like baggage carrier, load carrier. Yeah, load carrier. No? Who is carrying the big heavy load of formalism and judging everything according to externals and being dualistic, while the Saragrahi is just taking the essence from every tradition, every person, every situation. And of course, he not only spoke about being a Saragrahi, but he embodied that himself. And this Saragrahi spirit also took Bhaktivinoda Thakur, which is another feature that I like to highlight, to address Shastra in a very dynamic way. To address some sections of scriptures in a ways that not everyone will address them.
Man macht das auf eine Art, wie nicht viele
Mhm.
machen.
Like you were mentioning a few minutes ago, Shanti, when he mentions, if you want to have a good shock treatment, you can study Krishna Samhita of Bhaktivinoda Thakura. If you are too much of a Barabahi, you read Krishna Samhita and hopefully you end up being a Saragrahi after the reading. It's a very dynamic treatise when he, I don't know, like for example, he will speak about the descriptions of hell in Shastra are not to be taken literally.
Comment publication of Krishna Samhita, which one has a good language?
I don't know how many there are in English. In German, I don't know, to begin with. There are not. And in English, I don't think there are that many. You have one here? Any here? Yeah, there are not that many, but so there are not two options to recommend. And I don't recall who were the translators of those. So we can see which one is available here. I have a PDF if someone will like. Or he will like, for example, as we were talking the other day, when he speaks about the asuras that Krishna killed in Braj, he will describe them in terms of an artist, like representing something, which for me is very interesting because, of course, in one sense, the asuras, they were real people that were killed by Krishna in the Leela. They are not just like a concept, a metaphor. But also, you can address the Shastra from a metaphorical level as well. There are different degrees to understand Shastra. For example, generally there are three levels you can address scripture. You could say literal, allegorical, call it like that, allegorical, or esoteric. No? So literal means literal. You are not drawing like a teaching, like for example, you take everything like as it is being said. If Krishna is calling Arjuna in the Gita, I don't know, Purusha Vyagra, which means tiger among men, a literal reading will think, okay, Arjuna is walking in four legs and has like tiger skin. He's a tiger among men. That's literal. But that's not the way to understand it. You have to go to the allegorical or like interpretive approach, which now this means that due to his courage in battle, like he's a tiger among men. Or these sections, when the suras are killed, Bhaktivinoda Thakura is resorting to this allegorical reading, like this means this symbolizes this, like this is like an archetype for that. It's not the ultimate meaning, the esoteric meaning, when you are participating in the Leela and living the excitement of Krishna killing Bhakasura. That's another level of addressing those descriptions, which is esoteric. You are participating in that. But to reach that level, there is a place for addressing scripture in an interpretive way or allegorical, archetypal way. I don't know. For example, Krishna's lifting Govardhan. That's not a metaphor. That happened. But also you can take, okay, Krishna's lifting Govardhan means Krishna is giving shelter in the midst of the storm. We are going through inner storms. Unlike the Brajavasis, they went to Krishna taking full shelter, asking for shelter, and also open that the shelter that Krishna may provide can take any form he wants. Because sometimes we may go to Krishna and say, Krishna, give me shelter, but we already have an idea of how the shelter should look like. No? Or Krishna, give me mercy, and we already know how the mercy should look like exactly. No? So that's not the way to pray for mercy or for shelter. No? If you already have figured out everything so perfectly, why you need to ask someone else? No? But sometimes we do that. We pray to Krishna, so I'd like to say, oh, Krishna, give me mercy, I need mercy, your mercy. But again, with some idea of how that should look like. So then Krishna replies and sends mercy in another form, in the form we need. And we quickly will go to him and pray again. Krishna, give me mercy to protect me from this. And Krishna will say, but that was my mercy. No? You asked for mercy and gave you mercy. Now you are praying to me to protect you from the mercy I gave you before. So it doesn't make sense. So in this Govardhan Lila, my point is the Brajavasis are going to Krishna for shelter, but they have no idea how the shelter will look like. They're not thinking Krishna will take a heel and lift it for 7 days with a small finger. That was totally unexpected. So they were open that the shelter may take any form. And it did. And it ended up in the greatest blessing. It began as the worst curse. The whole village is about to die in just rain. And it ended up in the greatest blessing. 1 week of uninterrupted darshan of Krishna without blinking for a week. That never happened ever before or after. So again, you can take all this, extract these lessons from the Lila. This is a way of addressing the Shastra in a more interpretive way. The ultimate level of participation is you are there, living it, all the bhavas, all the emotions. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur presented also this, no, in a very unique way with the examples I gave. No? This section is not to be taken literally. This section is not to, this can be read in a more nuanced way, representing anarthas and so on and so forth. So that's important for us to address Shastra with sensitivity and with common sense. Like I shared something today, Rupa Goswami, he says in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, when he describes the Uttam Adhikari, the highest devotee, he says the Uttam Adhikari is Shastra Yukta Chane Punaha. So the Uttam Adhikari is Shastra Nipun, which means he's expert in the scriptures, but he's quick to clarify Yukta Nipun. Yukta means logic. But logic not so limited to the Nyaya system of logic, but logic in terms of common sense.
To make it understandable.
Yeah. And to approach the scripture, to approach the scripture in a realistic, commonsensical, sensitive way, like Krishna using the word yukta in the Bhagavad Gita 6-7, yukta hara viharasya yukta chistasya, no? To do things in a proper way, like yukta vairagya. Yukta means proper, correct. So that's important. He's saying he's an expert in Shastra, but expert in Shastra also means expert in addressing Shastra in a commonsensical way. Because sometimes we can end up using Shastra to present things that are not very much logical. They're pretty irrational, illogical, against our deepest intuitions and once our own consciousness. So, yeah, that's an important point. What else? Well, I've heard some people. Do you have a few minutes? Yeah. Do we have eternity on our side? Eternity is in our favor. So I've heard some people saying, well, those things that Bhaktivinoda Thakur say that you are praising now, Maharaj, were say mostly in this Bhagavad speech, Krishna Samhita, those were his initial works. And I've heard that sometimes it's kind of, in time he changed. In time he stopped talking in that way. So even if that's the case, which one could make a case of studying his works and seeing that eventually he emphasized other type of things, that doesn't mean that he's disagreeing with what he said before. It's just that in the progression he's showing, he's becoming inclined in a certain direction, but the things he mentioned before were like a very good foundation for all the things that then he went deep into. And it doesn't mean that, again, because he's not talking about that in his last book, doesn't mean that he rejected that. It means that he integrated all that into the equation, into the situation he's now. No? So I will take it like that.
Concrete about that, in which way you could explain how we change
again, like for example, Bhaktivinoda Thakura in some works, he will be talking about other traditions, like what I quoted. We'll be talking about whatever.
But then how did he change?
Eventually, many of his writings became more and more esoteric and more focused in Lila and his eternal service. So someone may say, that's the real Bhaktivinoda Thakur. No? All the other things were in his stage when he was before being converted to Vaishnavism or in the beginning. So we don't take that much importance to that. But we will, I will say, I will speak for me. I prefer to see, no, those things are equally valid, belong to that particular stage of unfolding, and are showing that if you want to reach to that the ultimate place he was expressing his anti-lila, so to say, those other things are to be important to build a very important foundation, so to say.
So at the beginning he was more broad, like in the topics, and then
If you want to put it like that, yeah.
specific.
Specific, but doesn't mean that he was rejecting the original breath,
Yeah.
because sometimes it can be thought like that. No, like he changed his mind about that. No, he just became naturally drawn, called into specificity, into something very specific. Worship of Gaur Gadadhar in Godrum in his last moment, but it doesn't mean that he's rejecting everything else. It's just how he's being called. It's like Mahaprabhu. Mahaprabhu, you can see the same sequence in Mahaprabhu. Before becoming a Vaishnava in the Leela, becoming a Vaishnava, preaching in a certain way, practicing, and eventually becoming more and more specific, entering Gambhira, never to return. But it doesn't mean that everything he said outside of the Gambhira is not important. Yeah. And probably it's more important for us what he said before Gambhira than what he said inside in our present stage. That's my point. To reach our own Gambhira, something like that. So we have to also learn to relate to that. Yeah.
Can you explain me what you understand under the word esoteric?
Yeah.
Esoteric.
Yes, what you mean by that word? What you mean? Because I have a very
What do you understand by esoteric?
I want to know what.
I also want to know what you understand. She doesn't want to say.
I think she wants to override her previous understanding.
Yes.
I think you said you gave an example on literal, allegorical, and then you said esoteric as participation of the lila.
Yeah, that again, if you refer to esoteric in connection to what I was saying in that, yeah, that was my point. Because you can speak about that word in different contexts. But in the three approaches to the scripture, I mentioned that esoteric will be, you are reading the whatever, a lila, like I was saying, and you are really taking part of that. You are experiencing it in that participatory way. So
What is in Sanskrit word for that? I mean, literal is mukhya vritti, and then allegorical is vyanjana vritti, and the esoteric, what's that term? Das ist wie, er hat ja das, ist nicht so eine wichtige Frage eigentlich. Er hat ja literarisch, allegorisch und esoterisch gesagt. Und literarisch und allegorisch heißt auf Sanskrit mukhya vritti und vyanjana vritti. Und was ist der Begriff für Esoterik? Ja. Das ist nicht so eine wichtige Frage. Aber genau, das ist meine Frage.
yeah,
Aber ist nur der Sanskrit-Name, wo die aber
I'm not referring to specific Sanskrit like categories that have been mentioned. I cannot recall exactly what Bhaktivinoda Thakura, which terms he used. But also I will say that I wouldn't limit Vyanjana Vritti to the second method, so to say, because in esoteric descriptions and participation, that's full of Vyanjana Vritti. Vyanjana means like suggested also, like implied meaning, like indirect speech. That's so much present into the esoteric narrative, so to say.
man say that Bhavanuvad is esoteric.
Yeah, technically speaking, yeah, that has the esoteric has to. You have esoteric and you have exoteric. So exoteric has more to do with external, something toward outside, and esoteric has to do more with the mystical, internal, contemplative experience, so to say. A few more points before concluding on Bhaktivinoda Thakura is that something that comes to mind is also I really love his emphasis on development of the notion of Sharanagati also. He wrote the whole song, which is a long one, and he tries to make the importance of this principle of surrender as the foundation on door, like the door. Sometimes we describe it as the stage on which the drama of the Leela is performed. Leela is like a drama where there's dance and performance, but there needs a very heavy stage to support such strong emotion things happening. So this stage, the wood of the stage, have to be made made of Saranagati. The wood has to be Saranagati, and it's important for us to constantly unfold what surrender means to us, so we can understand it in a healthy way also. Because sometimes surrender is presented as like surrender, no, like don't think, don't have critical discernment, just surrender, and that's not surrender. Or like a forced imposition instead of the most voluntary decision we take. So I really appreciate Bhaktivinoda Thakur's contribution in not only in Saranagati's song. He wrote so many songs. So his songs are a whole contribution unto itself. And something that we mentioned these days also, as you may remember, is, and with here we are reaching more the last stages of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's life somehow, is Bhaktivinoda Thakur's emphasis on identifying with the need of service. No? This example that we narrated of Kurukshetra, that he say, I would like to leave my body in Kurukshetra, remember? In connection to Radha's being in her most needy moment in front of Krishna, and I want to enter that point and serve the moment of the greatest necessity of my mistress, so to say. That's a very, very unique contribution that I appreciate from Bhaktivinoda Thakur, how much he's like making that point, identifying with the need of seva, and developing our whole abhiman, our whole sense of identity out of giving ourselves in that particular direction that I can contribute the most, so to say. And of course, in that connection, we can connect that need of Radha in Kurukshetra, of course, with the need of Radha in Gaur Lila as Gadadhar, as we spoke these days. How much need Krishna has as Mahaprabhu, and how much need therefore Radha has as Gadadhar by identifying with the need of Mahaprabhu. And that's why Bhaktivinoda Thakur is diving so deep in Gaur Lila. I think that's one of his main gifts to us, Bhaktivinoda Thakur giving us Gaur Lila. Sorry, I talked too quickly. Yeah, so
so wie die Manjaris immer eingetunt sind auf das, was Radhika braucht in jedem Moment. Das ist ihr ganzes Bewusstsein. So, aber wenn Krishna zu Gauranga wird, ist das seine Bedürftigkeit, seine Hilfe, ist viel, viel größer. Er ist ja viel verletzlicher. Und wenn Srimati Radhika zu Gadadhar wird, ist er in einem gleichen Maß noch verletzlicher, noch bedürftiger. Er braucht noch mehr. Und Bhaktivinoda Thakur in seiner unendlichen Seva-Haltung vertieft er sich deswegen komplett ins Gaur Lila. Das ist für ihn die Essenz. Weil Seva möchte sich immer vertiefter schenken. Und wo kann ich mich noch mehr schenken? Srimati Radhika braucht mich 24 Stunden, aber wenn sie als Gadadhar kommt, braucht sie mich noch mehr. Wir rufen sie wieder hin, um da noch intensiver zu dienen. Just explain.
Yeah. So I think that's one of the. That's one of
Das
the.
ist noch weit vorher, oder? Hä?
Ja, was ist jetzt mit Kurukshetra in dem Zusammenhang?
Das haben wir, als er von Gorgadadha gesprochen hat, vor 2 Tagen, hat er doch das lange erklärt, wie Srimati Radhika nach Kurukshetra geht und dort so leidet, weil Krishna ist plötzlich so anders. Und dann für Srimati Radhika muss es so wehtun. Bhaktivinoda Thakura sagt dann, ich möchte ihr dort dienen, in diesem Kurukshetra, weil dort braucht es am intensivsten. Ja, ich möchte dort dienen.
So from both those perspectives, no, what he's saying in Kurukshetra, in connection to Kurukshetra, and his service to Gorgadadar, that in one sense the principle is the same, identifying with that extreme service necessity. So in connection to Gaur Lila, again, that's one of the main contributions of Bhaktivinoda Thakura. That's what he's sometimes called the 7 Goswami by us. No, as the 6 Goswamis gave us Krishna Lila in such depth and detail, Bhaktivinoda Thakura gave us Gaur Lila in such depth and detail, not only by rediscovering the place of birth, the Jogapith, the place where Mahaprabhu was born, by writing profusely about that. He wrote so much, Bhaktivinoda Thakura. But again, by giving us this depth of conception of what Mahaprabhu is about, Navadvip is about, and of course, in connection to Gaur Lila, one of the main contributions of Bhaktivinoda Thakura is Gaur Gadadhar, specifically Gaur Gadadhar. No? His very pranam mantra includes this point. No? Namo Bhaktivinodaya Satchidananda Namine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupanoga Varayate. No? So he's somehow the embodiment of Gaur Shakti. No? Gaur Shakti is Gadadhar, basically. The Shakti of Gaur. No? Radha is the Shakti of Krishna. So he is the very embodiment of this spirit. And he sang so beautifully about Sri Sri Gaur Gadadhar, Smara Gaura Gadadhar, Akeli Kalam, and so on the famous last verse of Godrum Bhajan Upadesh. Just remember Gaur Gadadhar, just follow Gaur Gadadhar, just hear about Gaur Gadadhar, just worship Gaur Gadadhar, and that's the end of the song. Bhaktivinoda Thakura becomes lost and found. He glorifies Godrum, and then he says, just remember, follow, hear about, worship Gaur Gadadhar. And he called in that direction, fully.
Did he reveal his identity
in
the Gaur Lila?
Well, in Gaur Lila, the identity will be that the sadhaka, that the one is showing in his sadhaka Lila, but younger. That's how it's described in our tradition. We know that, of course, who he is in the Braja Lilas, Kamala Manjari, he himself has described that. But in Gaur Lila, basically, he is Bhaktivinoda. No, that's the idea. No, what's mentioned in our tradition is if you reach perfection, whether you think of someone attaining perfection, in that particular lifetime, that's why the body is put into samadhi. Sometimes that's the meaning of samadhi. The body is put in salt, like a way of preserving the body, like indicating in that same body, similar form, fully spiritualized, as a younger Brahmin boy, that person is serving Mahaprabhu in the Nitya-siddha. So, but generally it is mentioned that you have like 12, 13 years. So sometimes it came to me the idea, it would be nice to get pictures of our acharyas when they were 12, 13 years and put them in the parampara, because in the altar generally is what's going on in the spiritual world now. No? So anyhow, we can see how Bhaktivinoda Thakura, just to conclude, since we ended on this high note on Gaur Gadadhar and how embedded he was in that worship, in that conception, but at the same time, how broad he was in terms of interfaith dialogue and relating with the West and modernity, breadth, no? And depth. No? The connection with Gaur Lila, the connection with Gaur Gadadhar. So Bhaktivinoda Thakura was very deeply esoteric in his practice and writings, but also he was not lacking breadth. in his outreach, in his sharing with others. So he was showing also this is possible. No, it's not that you can only be a Bhajananandi, so to say. You can only be a Goshtyanandi. No? Bhajananandi means someone deeply absorbing one's own practice. Goshtyanandi is more connected to interaction with the public, so to say. But the two have to be connected. Indeed, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati once said, the best Bhajananandi is the Goshtyanandi who preaches. Sorry, the best Goshtyanandi is the Bhajananandi who preaches. Like, if you want to share with others, first you have to be somehow Bhajananandi. You have to have an inner life.
Sind diese zwei Worte?
Yeah.
Diese Worte, der Bhajananandi ist jemand, der eigentlich sein ganzes Leben nur dem Bhajan widmet. Aber wenn so einer, der wirklich einen Geschmack darin hat, aufsteht und spricht, dann hat das wirklich transformative Wirkung, sonst sind es einfach nur leere Worte.
So, yeah, if we engage in some form of outreach, we should have first an inreach. If we want to distribute the teachings outside, first those have to be distributed inside of us. And that's how Mahaprabhu's movement was created. No? The external movement came from an internal movement in his heart. Something was moving his heart so much that it made him move. Physically, he started to dance and celebrate. And that external movement of his transcendental body created a whole external movement in the form of a lineage. But it all began by something strongly moving his heart. So that's an important lesson for those who would like to follow the footsteps of Bhaktivinoda Thakura. So in this way, Bhaktivinoda Thakura, I mean, he's kind of the father of our family, if you want to put it like that, the Bhaktivinoda Parivar. And he very quickly established this idea, no, we have to be deep, we have to be profound, we have to be dynamic, we have to be non-sectarian, we have to be generous with each other, we have to be working on our own individuation and so on. So I think that's a very unique combination that our Parivar has. And with this, I'm not saying we are better than others. I'm not creating this type of spirit that goes against Bhaktivinoda Thakur. But it's nice to appreciate the particular DNA that is coming to us of all this breadth and all this depth. Very similar to Mahaprabhu's campaign. Mahaprabhu's campaign is so wide, but also so deep at the same time. And we should appreciate the two, not one at the cost of the other. And being in such a beautiful family, of course, the last point is, well, okay, the question that remains is what I am supposed to offer myself as a member of that family. You know, how to repay back such a gift and how to participate in this beautiful Parivar. What can I contribute with my personal existence? How to justify my existence again? How to be a living member of the Sampradaya, because Sampradaya means a living school. No, it's not like a dead thing where everyone is like a museum piece. Everything is alive. So how to be part of this current dhara of aliveness that Bhaktivinoda Thakur has brought to the world. So anyhow, a few words trying to, again, on a personal level, share some of my reasons to be a fan of Bhaktivinoda Thakur and why I feel that today we have another celebration like all these other days. Well, which are the reasons to celebrate Bhaktivinoda Thakur? So I just touched one point in an infinite line, of course, no? But from my today, a little bit from my personal perspective, so I hope touch your heart somehow and brought to all of us a greater, deeper appreciation of the contribution of Thakur Bhaktivinoda. So there are some hands raised. She was raising the hand since the beginning of my lecture, and I told her, give me a few minutes and I finish.
I have a small
Okay.
question.
Yeah. The question can be small, but the answer I never know.
Well, is heel small. Das Buch, wo Bhaktivinoda Thakur nach Kanada geschickt hat, ist das die Lehre von Sri Chaitanya oder ist das wieder ein neues Werk?
Is this book that Bhaktivinoda Thakura sent to Canada, is this the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, or is it another book?
I mean, by which book she's referring to, by the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. There are many books almost with the same title.
Was dat van Walter Eidlitz?
Von er geschrieben?
Genau,
Bhaktivinoda.
Das was an der
Nee, das ist nicht das.
The book is Sri Chaitanya. The book is called Sri Chaitanya, His Life and Precepts.
Leben und Leben. Das ist.
But I'm saying this because there are many books which almost have the same name. Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, Life of Sri Chaitanya, Life and Teachings, Life and Precepts, with different authors.
Ja, aber das hat der Deutsche Kanayala hat das Buch heißt eigentlich Chaitanya Shikshamrita
That's another one.
und dann hat er das nur so übersetzt, die Lehren zwischen das ist ein anderes Buch.
Yeah, Chaitanya Shikshamrita is another one. Yeah. Okay, finally.
I have two questions.
Zu langsam. Vielleicht auf die.
It was now.
Okay, du
I was
startest.
self-understood.
I have two questions. One was from the beginning.
Yes.
One was just now came. That from beginning was like when you said this point Krishna Chandra made, and then you said like that aspect that the Lord reciprocates to the devotees is the Narayan aspect. So what to speak about Krishna and Gaur Gadadhar? But I don't understand this because I see like, okay, Gaur Gadadhar and Radha Krishna are so much absorbed in their lila and in the love they are getting from the devotees. That's so a high caliber of path they get and they reciprocate, but then how they can reciprocate with other sadhakas, which are like me in a very beginning stage, and like this, and Narayan, he is like not so circumambulated with a high caliber of love, so he has the capacity to reciprocate. So I don't understand that part, like where, if it is true for Narayan, so what to speak of Krishna?
So should we start praying to Narayan that he will reciprocate to us?
Am Anfang hat er gesagt, dass Vishnu spricht, oh, ich bin völlig abhängig von meinen Devotees und sie sind mein Ein und Alles. Und dann hat Maharaj gesagt, das spricht über Vishnu. Krishna ist sicher noch viel, viel mehr. Und dann sagt Mohini, ja, aber Krishna in Vrindavan und das Gaudiya, da sind ja so absorbiert in ihrem Lila, in der spirituellen Welt. Wir haben sie noch eine Fähigkeit dazu. Narayan ist weniger umgeben von den liebenden Devotees, hat vielleicht mehr Kapazität, also sich auf die gefallenen Seelen in dieser Welt noch zu richten.
So I was referring to this verse of the Bhagavatam, chapter 4, 9th canto, Aham Bhakta Paradino Hyasutanda. So there are 6 verses there. There's a whole sequence, very important section of verses. I think it's 9, 4, 63 till 68. So those are very important verses, very beautiful ones. And this is the first one. Aham Bhakta Paradino Hyasutantri Baduya Sadhubir Grihastha Hridayo Bhaktir Bhakta Jana Priya. So this is in the context of the Leela with Durvasa Muni and Ambarish Maharaj. So Durvasa is, as you know, the Sudarshan is running after him everywhere, and eventually he reaches Vaikuntha. And the point is that it's when Bhagavan is telling him, he indirectly starts to say how big of a mistake he made, basically. Because he's saying, you offended Ambarish, you offended my devotee, and for me, my devotees, and then all these verses come. So the first one he's saying, I'm fully controlled by my devotees. I don't have the least independence in connection to them. So this is spoken by Vishnu. So my point was, if Narayan is controlled by his devotees, he has no independence, which will be Krishna's version of that same verse. Because he's receiving such a high caliber of love, So how much more he will say, I'm controlled by them, I have no independence. That was my point when I mentioned that.
So when Narayan is controlled by Shanta and Dasyaras, so Krishna is even more controlled.
How much that same
When
idea,
people are,
how much that
the door
applies.
for
Mhm.
Madhurya Rasa.
So that was basically the point of the verse, no? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, yeah.
And my second question
Yes.
is like, okay, we mentioned, or you mentioned, that we are Bhaktivinoda Parivar, and because of this unique interpretation of by Bhaktivinoda and his reformatory thoughts, but why we don't? I mean, also I'm studying Bhakti Sandarbha, and we are dealing with the interpretation of Jiva Goswami, and how he is interpreting Bhagavatam is also very revolutionary and reformatory. So why don't we also consider us? Why we do refer to Bhaktivinoda Thakur? Why don't we say like, our 6 Goswamis? And we say like, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur. I mean, it is just common sense and natural to be go in the width, and to also question, that should be just normal. So why to point out that so much from Bhaktivinoda Thakur? And I mean, Jiva Goswami was also like that. He was also very revolutionary, and he learned so many language to reach the people. And so you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
Why to refer? We can refer. We are in the Parivar of Jiva Goswami. We are in the
Aber wir sollen nicht Jiva Goswami.
Ja,
So
understand.
viel Jiva Goswami hat so viele Interpretationen gemacht vom Bhagavatam, hat so viele neue revolutionäre Ideen und des Verstehens, wie man das Bhagavatam versteht, in den Sandarbhas reingebracht. Wieso beziehen wir uns so spezifisch auf Bhaktivinoda Thakur und Jiva Goswami?
Oh, not only Jiva Goswami, also 6 Goswamis.
So, Krishna Chandra, you please.
But today is today.
It's not just because of the day, but we call us Bhaktivinoda Parivar. It's not because it's
We call
the
also ourselves Rupa Nuga.
day. Yeah.
So, but maybe if we analyze the practice of modern Gaudiya Vaishnavas here, you know, how we do parikramas, the whole Navadip parikrama is like, everything is from Bhaktivinoda Thakura, and how he like really, in a wonderful way, even extracted, we cannot, practically no one ever read all the Sandarbhas. I have hardly seen anyone, you know, but he extracted so much essence again and again and made it accessible, like in Jaiva Dharma, and like, you know, in scriptures, and the whole songs, like the essence of all the Vedas, he made like accessible in many songs. Many in the Gaudiya Mate sing also the Mangalarati of Bhaktivinoda Thakur in most Gaudiya Mate. So, like, you know, in the daily practice. But I personally not think he's just a great inspiration, but I would not overemphasize just one person. Okay, sometimes when we speak, it's okay, but we are like grateful to each and every bhakta who helps on our path, and we are extremely thankful to Narottam Das Thakur. There is unlimited personalities. So I wouldn't just take one.
Thank you.
Maybe you can add something.
It kind of what comes to my mind what I said the other day when I was talking about Gadadhar Pandit, and I said, in one sense, we could present each member of the Panchatattva as the most important. But since we were talking about Gadadhar Pandit, we speak about him as the most important. So in a similar way, today we are talking about Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and there will be a special emphasis in his glories. But other day we will be talking about Rupa Goswami, and we will talk about us as Rupanuga Vaishnavas. Or when we talk about us, Mahaprabhu will talk about us as Gaudiya Vaishnavas. So my point is, and again, when we are talking about Bhaktivinoda Thakura, I mentioned he's also referred to as the seventh Goswami. So with that, we are also establishing a link toward, I mean, he cannot be the seventh Goswami if he's not nourished and sustained by the sixth Goswami. So that naturally take us in that direction. And I agree with what Krishna Chandra mentions. No, I'm sorry if my presentation may have been interpreted like that, like because it's not my mode. Like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, only Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he's the only one, he's the best. Everyone else is below him. That wouldn't be tasteful glorification. But it's his day, and we are kind of biased towards him today in this particular way. But when we talk about Jiva Goswami, we have so much to say about him, and so many things, similar patterns like the ones you shared in connection to the Thakur and so on and so forth. So yeah, there is no. That's the art of praise of the sadhus. No, we should praise everyone in a unique way, but without over glorifying. Yeah, without minimizing will be an over glorification. If I say Bhaktivinoda Thakur is so incredible that all the Goswamis, we don't care for the Goswami. That's not correct. That's not praise to Bhaktivinoda Thakur. That's no, it's okay. So and also there is place, of course, for every devotee to feel their personal inspiration. So someone may feel, for me, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is the main inspiration. Someone will say, for me, Jiva Goswami. And also there is place for that, like when someone asks Srila Siddhar Maharaj, who is the most important guru? No, the Diksha Guru, the Siksha Guru, the Purvacharyas. Who is the most important guru? And he said, the one who is helping you the most. And at times can be one, and at times can be other. But all of them are working together. That's important to bear in mind. It's not that they're competing with one another. No, the parampara is like a teamwork. They are serving the same ideal. So yeah, basically that will be the answer. I hope that helps. But thank you for the question. Yeah. Okay. Something else before concluding?
If there is time, if not, I'll ask it tonight.
Today we have, whatever you prefer. Yes. Okay. Today we have a Q&A in the evening. Okay. So one more, and in the evening is somehow related to the topic.
It's related to Sunday night, so that's why I said I can ask it tonight. I have two. One is related to Sunday night, so what you said, and one is related to what Krishna Chandra said.
On Sunday night.
No, today.
So maybe you can ask the question related to today's topic to Krishna Chandra, and in the evening also. Okay, so we'll conclude here.
Just one thing more. Maybe the idea about Bhaktivinoda Thakur, maybe he's also the more in the present sadhus are coming. Like the more we have like an accessibility, we don't have an autobiography of Jiva Goswami.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes traditions tend to like deisieren. I don't know the English word.
Deify.
Deify saints. This is called hagiography.
Yeah.
This means die sind wie vergöttlicht.
Embellishments.
Yeah, they're far away, and they have nothing to do with ever, I think. And like what you said, Svajim and Alikita, and we have more access to more present sadhus, and I think this is an important thing. Sometimes when we have from many previous saints, we have some ideas, and das sind wie Legenden. The legends. And legends is something a little different. So that's why the more in the present someone is coming, that we have more accessibility also.
Yes. Thank you for that contribution, important one. And that's a whole different topic in regard to the hagiographies and how to flesh out and separate some of the things that may be actually truth and maybe some literary or emotional way of saying something, but maybe a little bit over the top of what actually happened. And acknowledging that without being a problem, no? Because it's just, even sometimes a literary style, so to say. You must have some, I don't want to call exaggeration, but some like extra ornamentation, no? So yeah, it's important. Sri Thakur Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Avirbhav Mahotsav Tithi Sri Thakur Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Sri Sri Gaur Gadadhar Ji ki jai. Sri Sri Radha Govinda Ji ki jai. Harinam Prabhu ki jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Premanand Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhuvya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Hari Bol.